She sure looks cool hovering up there above the trailer. All right, welcome back to the channel. So we're on the sailboat project again. Like you probably saw in the previous video, we have the boat up off the trailer, which is awesome. So lots of things I want to get accomplished in this video. So number one, I want to sand all the spots that I couldn't reach while the boat was on the trailer, so we finally get all of that old bottom paint off of the boat. We also need to finish up the repairs on the hull, including the damage from the missing bunk. And we're going to go through and use fairing compound to fill in all the defects that are in the gel coat. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to finish sanding up the centerboard, fix any defects in the gel coat in the centerboard, and then we're going to actually test a barrier coat, because that's going to be the next step after this, is we want to get the bottom barrier coated. And I'm not sure exactly which product I want to use, so we're going to actually be utilizing Total Boat's Total Protect on our centerboard. That's going to be kind of our test sample. So first things first, let's get sanding. All right, so one of the things I decided to do was, this is the hole that the centerboard swings on, the main pivot point. And what I've done is I've gone in with some, I had some carbon fiber cloth laying around. So I first did a thickened epoxy around, not actually a thickened polyester resin. And then I went back in and I added the carbon fiber material. Did the same thing over here, but only on the one side, because we want to keep it open on this side. And then I'm gonna have to drill a hole through here, coming back through, right through there. But this was all pretty chewed up and kind of getting weak. And this is gonna take some abuse, because there's a little bolt with nuts pulling on this all the time when it raises and lowers the keel. So I thought, let's go ahead and reinforce it while we have it out. And yeah, so carbon fiber cloth laying around, might as well use it. So we'll let this stuff cure up, we'll trim everything off and sand it, and we should be good to go. So it's time to dig into our damage. So this is the worst damage on the whole boat. This is the one thing that I would say that's keeping it from being something I would put on the water. And this again is from a missing trailer bunk and a bolt just grinding away. So I've already laid in some epoxy with a filler on the inside of the hole to kind of beef it up on the backside of this. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna get in here and we're gonna grind this guy out with this little air tool. We're gonna get rid of all the damaged material. This is not as bad as I thought. We'll do a little bit of a grinding here, but not much. But this is gonna take some cloth. So we're gonna have to kind of bevel the edge, get all the broken parts out, and then we can start measuring up cloth. I still need to sand all this off, but I wanna get going on this thing because I wanna get this part repaired. Because again, we wanna get repairs done so we can do a barrier coat or something on the bottom and get this boat back on the trailer. All right, so these are our first 3 layers. So we're just going slightly bigger each one. This one's probably still a little too big. I need to trim it down. So we put this guy down first, then this on top of it, and we're gonna keep building layers till we fill it all the way into the surface. All right, so here is our repair. So like you would have seen in the video, we first ground out all the broken parts, beveled the edge, and then we just basically started laying up laminate. And I didn't count exactly, but I think I had to put about 12 layers of laminate of the fiberglass cloth with the resin. And then once I got to the very end where it was just a very slight amount of dip where really didn't have enough room for another laminate, I filled it with a polyester resin mixed with the 406, so like a thickened resin. And then here, this side was not that bad at all. There was no real structural damage at all. So this one I just filled in with the resin only, so that way I could just then go sand it smooth. Now I still want to fair this with the resin with the 407, and that'll get into these little spots here and make sure, but this is solid as a rock and smooth and good to go. So our most important repair to make the boat seaworthy is now taken care of and good to go. So again, I'll just fair it, do a little bit more sanding, and then. All right, so you can see here, I've got the fairing compound over the top of the repair we did. So we're just letting this stuff cure, and then we're gonna go sand it back off, and we should have our perfectly smooth finished repair ready for epoxy bottom, barrier coat, or whatever we're going to put over it. So I think I have my last bits of boat icing our fairing compound here to fill in some of these voids before we do our bottom coat. I've already gone back and resanded the hole. Oh, there's one I missed. I'll have to check that one. But I've already gone back and resanded this with 80 grit all over again. There's our repair looking solid and good, loving that. So at this point, I just need to finish sanding these guys off. I need to sand up underneath there, which up in there is that trunk. We need to get up in there and sand. I also removed the ballast control. We're going to replace that with a fresh one, and we got to get that sanded up because we want to barrier coat all of this. Okay, so one of the things we need to tackle is sanding the, you call it the centerboard trunk, which is up inside the, where the centerboard is stowed under the boat when the centerboard is pulled up. Some people call it the swing keel. It's technically a centerboard. So I picked up these sanding sponges, 80 grit, just like a Home Depot kind of thing. These will help me conform to the rounded shape up inside there because it's really hard to reach up in there. So I think these are going to do a good job at helping me finish sanding up the centerboard trunk, because we do want to barrier coat that as well, since it's just some old gel coat in there. And again, we don't want any kind of water penetration if the boat sits in the water for a long period of time. All right, so this is what it looks like when the ballast is removed. I've got this fishing line running through it so that I can feed the new ballast valve back up inside there. So someone put some duct tape or something on it to probably hold it in place at one point. So we're gonna clean and sand all that off. And then here's our trunk. So this is where I'm gonna use the sponges to get up inside there. And mainly it's that top part. The sides of the trunk I've got sanded pretty well, but like back in these corners, I need to get all this sanded up so we can install the barrier coat. And there's our new cable for our centerboard. I've got it just peeking out there. I'll push it back up in so that way I can paint, and then I can just reach up in there and pull it back down and connect it when we reinstall the centerboard. But she's looking good. All of this has been faired and done. I mean, everything is really looking great. And just like that, we've got our ballast valve area sanded out and cleaned. It looks really good, so ready for our bottom coat. And then I'm still working in here. This is a challenge. I've got most of it sanded except the top edge. So I'm gonna do everything I can, but it's only gonna be so much I can do. The area up there too has not had a lot of abuse, so I'm not overly worried about it, but just if I can get the barrier coat adhered properly up there, it would be for the best. So this has been a massive amount of work, but she's looking good. So everything here is smooth, you can't feel it. So this is all gonna get covered up by our barrier coat. I will need to sand, barrier coat, and paint these spots, and then also up front once we drop it back on the trailer, but that should be no big deal. At this point, just a little bit more sanding, and then we get to wash it down with acetone, tape off our water line, and then we're ready for bottom paint. All right, so I've been a little bit up in the air on what I want to do with the bottom of the boat. I know that I want a barrier coat. I don't want to deal with the gel coat. I feel like it's going to be way too much work to get a smooth surface. Now, it might be the same with this stuff. I don't really know, but I want to try. I was thinking about doing the West Systems 422 epoxy barrier. I like West Systems product a lot. My concern with it is it has to be done in a very short period of time, and since I'm single-handed, that's going to be a little tough. So what I went ahead and did is I ordered a small quantity of 1 quart of what's called Total Protect from Total Boat. So this is their epoxy primer barrier coat product. I also ordered their epoxy thinner because you're supposed to thin this to get it to roll on correctly. So it's 2-part. We've got the actual product itself, and then this is like the curing agent or hardener. It's a 3-to-1 mixture ratio. And then you add, I think, between 3% to 10% of the epoxy primer after this is sat for 15 minutes mixed together. And then I'm gonna use, I have one of my foam rollers left, and I have a couple of these red feather rollers, which I do like the red feather when doing the gel coat. I thought it worked better. The compromise is these are quite a bit more expensive than these guys. And on the website for Total Boat, they're actually recommending using a foam roller. It's a different foam roller than this, but it's going to take forever to get them here, and I just don't really want to deal with that. And what we're doing today is we're just doing our centerboard. People refer to it as that keel, the centerboard. We're going to do that first because I want to see, number one, how the rollers work, and I want to see how this stuff goes before I start committing to the entire hole, which is a lot of work. And it's going to be just below the water line, but still, it'll be a lot of work. I'm going to need to buy a whole, probably 1 to maybe even 2 gallons of this stuff, possibly, to fit the size of boat. So I'm going to start with the quart. We're going to give it a go. If it works well on the centerboard, then I can decide, yeah, let's go ahead and use this on the rest of the boat. So it's kind of like our rudder where we use the gel coat as a test there, doing the same thing on the centerboard with this guy. So I've already gone out and started wiping down the centerboard. Okay. Right about 3 ounces is what we're going to start with. So I need to add the 3-to-1 ratio from the 3 ounces to this guy, which I believe is 1 ounce, if I do my math correctly. So we'll basically bring the curing agent up till 4. So we'll have a total of 4 ounces of product. And then what we're going to do is mix it for 15 minutes. I'm going to do it by hand with a stir stick. We're going to mix it really good by hand with the stir stick. Then it's got to sit for 15 minutes. And then we're going to go back and add the thinner, which I'm going to do wrong side. I got these little cups. So we want to do about 0.4 ounces. So a little under half an ounce would be 10%. but we're gonna start with 5. So we're gonna do just under a 1/4 ounce of the thinner and see how it looks. And if the consistency looks good, I can even roll a little bit on if it looks great. If not, you can just add a little bit more thinner and mix it up a little more if you need to. So we're gonna give that a go. Okay, it's a little hard to see on the camera, but I'm just under a 1/2 ounce of the thinner, which would get me right around 10% for my 4 ounces that I've mixed up of the barrier coat. So right now I've got the timer going for 15 minutes. We're then gonna add, I'm gonna start with half of this and I'm gonna mix it. So that should leave me about a 1/4 ounce left in here. That'll get me at 5%. I wanna start at 5% and see how it does. And then we got our roller ready and we're just gonna start rolling it on the centerboard and seeing how it turns out. All right, I'm just waiting on this stuff to get through the 15-minute period so I can add the thinner. You know, one question that you might have is, after I tried the gel coat scenario and didn't like the way the foam rollers are working, why am I starting with a foam roller on the centerboard? Did I not learn my lesson? Well, my thought on it is 2 things. Number one, this is a different product than gel coat, so it could go on differently. And the other thing that really pushed me to try the foam roller is the fact that Total Boat recommends foam rollers. They have their Mighty Mini or Mighty Micro, I can't remember the exact name of it. It's just gonna take quite a while, like a good week or so, to get some of those, and I don't wanna wait around. I wanna keep this project moving. I had this foam roller sitting around, so I thought I'd give it a try. And I'll tell you right off the bat, if I don't like the way it works, I will abandon it and jump over to the red feather rollers, which are the ones that I use. These are the 1/4 inch nap red feathers. Sorry for the light there. I used these on the gel coat and it worked really well. I definitely think it was an improvement. And this, again, this is a test for me to decide, because if I do the whole, I'm gonna have to buy a lot of rollers, and the foam are a lot cheaper, and if they produce a similar or just as good of finish as, you know, the red feather would, then I'm gonna buy the foam. So we're almost done with our 15-minute little incubation period or whatever they call it, and we're gonna start adding thinner and then start rolling on some barrier coat. All right, so our 15 minutes is up. So I'm gonna get very carefully add a little bit. It's about, that's right at a quarter, almost to the 1/4 mark. So we're gonna go with that. All right, first coat's on. There we go. It's not too bad. I need to let it dry. It's got some texture. I'm hoping that's gonna kind of flow out as it dries. I don't know if you saw in the video, but I abandoned the foam roller really quickly. It was leaving a lot of the little texture dots, and I think the rollers just come apart. So again, this is all wet, so we're gonna let this completely dry and see if it smooths out. And it's going to determine how much work we're going to have to do in the future for sanding. But yeah, so let's let this thing dry. Experiment complete. Okay, barrier coat operation moving right along. So what I did is I'm on my second coat on the center board, which again is our kind of test bed to make sure we really like this stuff before we go to the extent of putting it on the hull. Now I'm switched from the 1/4 inch down to the 3/16 nap mohair red material. I guess they call it like the lamb fur or whatever. I switched over to that per Total Boat's recommendation. And let me show you how it's coming out. All right, so here she is. Again, second coat. So a couple of things I'm telling you I'm learning from this stuff is you definitely do not want to move to the next section unless you're happy with what you're painting. So once you paint a section, if it's not perfect, keep staying on it, because if you leave it, it immediately starts to tack up. And if you go back on it, it leaves a lot of marks. That's why, I don't know if you can see it, but there's some little marks where I've gone from one section to the next. So basically I'm kind of working in sections, like here's a section, here's a section, here's a section. So right there you can see where I kind of went overlapped. So this isn't too big of a deal, but the less you have of this, the better. And then what I'm gonna be doing is I'm gonna get a good 4 coats on here so it's nice and thick. And then I will go back with an 80 grit sandpaper and my sander and do a light sanding to knock it down and smooth it. And then we'll go back and paint it. So not too big of a deal, but just something to keep in mind. And this is still drying, by the way, so it might be flowing a tiny bit. It could get a little bit better, but the stuff's not bad. I mean, it's just thick stuff, and I tried putting it on fairly thin, but yeah, you definitely get some of these marks going on. All right, so I want you to I want to see if you can pick it up. If you see these lines going left and right all the way across, those are my brush marks from all the coats. If you look really close, you can see texture. It's not bad. It's fairly smooth, but it's got just this slight amount of texture. So the plan is to give it a very light sanding with 80 grit. I don't want to take much of this stuff off, but I want to get it nice and smooth from when we put the paint on it. And then also sanding it gives it a good surface to be able to be prepared and ready to accept the paint. So let's just give it an overview and see what happens. Okay, this is sanding pretty well. There are some videos online and there are some reviews on the Total Boat Total Protect. It does have a texture, and I think that's just the nature of it. You know, you could try to maybe put it on a different way, but I'm doing what they said to do. I don't think the texture is that bad. The bottom of the boat, you know, this barrier coat stuff's gonna have a slight bit of texture. One of the big things people were complaining about, I'm gonna show you this, is they were claiming that this stuff just clogs the sander. It has not clogged my 80 grit sandpaper at all, whatsoever, which is great. Now, I'm also blowing it off as I go. I guess if you're leaving a lot of the sawdust, or not sawdust, sorry, the barrier coat sanding dust, maybe that could get clogged up into it. Now, this stuff is hard. It does not sand quickly. You have to, I don't want to put pressure on it to go too fast because I don't want to go through it. I just want to knock off that roughness on the top. And so far I've been able to do it. No clogging in the sandpaper. I'm just taking my time. I'm not putting a lot of pressure on, just being patient so it can hopefully get really nice and smooth. All right, so I decided to abandon the sanding. I don't feel like it's worth the extra work. There is some texture to it, but if you put it on in the thin coats, you thin it with about 10% of the thinner that Total Boat provides, I feel like it's definitely a good enough surface. Now you can go back and sand it and get it really smooth. This stuff is definitely doable. My concern is I feel like I take a lot of it off, and the whole point of the barrier coat is to have that coat of protection. So at this point, I'm committed to the Total Boat stuff. I think it'll work very well. I think it's gonna be more manageable with the timeline as opposed to the West systems. So I ordered a couple gallons, it's on its way. I also ordered some larger rollers because the hole is pretty good size. So I went ahead and stuck with the mohair, which is like the 1/8 inch nap. So I've got those on their way. And I also got a small sample of Total Boat's Krypton bottom paint. We're gonna experiment with that on the center board before we put it on the hole, but that stuff's all on its way. All right, so I feel I've accomplished a ton. We're still got a big road ahead. The barrier coats and the painting of the bottom is gonna be a lot of work. It's gonna take several days. We are gonna knock that out in the next video though, because I wanna keep, again, this this project moving, and I want to get it on the water as soon as possible. So thank you everyone that watches the video. Please feel free to like and subscribe if you want. You can also help donate to us on Patreon if you want to help the project. But we're trucking along. We're moving all ahead, and hopefully we're going to be on the water sooner than later.